Okay, today we're going to be working on creating exponential equations. So we're going to start with the basis of the exponential equation. We've talked about this in the previous video, but we will go from here. So first off, f of x, remember always that's the same thing as y. A is your starting value. Another way to think about that is starting value is usually in terms of a story problem on a graph. That's your y-intercept. And when you're thinking about how to figure out what it is, that's where your x equals 0. There's a few different ways to think about that. B is your multiplier. What we're looking at in the difference between an exponential and a linear equation, the y equals mx plus b, that goes up by the same amount every time. Like if I have a table, an xy table, and I have -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. If I have a linear equation, my y values might go up like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. So I'd have a y-intercept of 9 and a slope of 3 because this is going up 3 every time. So that would be 3x plus 9. That's a linear equation. Same growth factor every time. If I have an exponential equation, what's happening every time is my my starting value and everything else gets multiplied by the same number every time. So if I have something that, let's say we're at 2 right here and we multiply by 3, that's going to be 6. Multiply that by 3 is going to be 18. Multiply that by 3 is 54. Times 3 is 162. Times 3 is 1. Oops, that would be plus 3. 486. So once they start to go up, they go up quite a lot. So in figuring out what these things are, if we, so it's, sorry, a little discombobulated today. If our x values are increasing from top to bottom, or whichever direction our x values are increasing, we're going to be multiplying by something every time. If that something is a fraction, then our values are going to be, our y values are going to be getting smaller. To figure out what our multiplier is, we would divide going up. So 486 divided by 162, 162 divided by 54, 54 divided by 18. All these things should give me 3 because I multiplied by 3 to get the other direction. So all of these things all equal 3. And that would be my multiplier in this case. So that would be my b value. My starting value would be where x equals 0. So this equation would be f of x equals, or y equals 18 times 3 to the x. That x, that's just your exponent, tells you how many times that gets multiplied. And then y is usually your total. If we're looking at a word problem, that's your total outcome. So that's the exponential equation. So if we're looking at word problems, this is often pretty frequent. When we're looking at word problems, there's exponential growth and there's exponential decay. And this depends on what your multiplier is. With growth, you need your multiplier to be greater than 1. And it can't actually be 1 because if we continually multiply by 1, then nothing changes. In exponential decay, the multiplier is not going to be negative, so be careful about that. Is between 0 and 1. And again, not including 0 or 1 because there would be no growth or decay there. So we're generally looking at fractions or decimals. So So there's a couple things to this. So with exponential growth, an example that we're looking at is if, let's say I have an account that grows by 3% a year. Couple things I need to be comfortable with. One is going from a percentage to a decimal. Anytime you do that, you're going to divide by 100. Remove the decimal twice. So 3% is equal to 0.03. So if we're growing, back to our example, we have our initial 100% that we start with, plus our 3% that it grows. What that tells us is we have 103% of what we had the year before. So to change that into a decimal, we divide the 103 by 100 and we get 1.03. So that would be our multiplier in that particular case. On the other hand, decay, if I am decreasing, example, if I decrease by 7% per year. Sorry, this is getting messy. I have my 100%, and instead of using this as 7%, because that would be a very small amount, I take the 100% minus the 7%, which gives me 93%. So when I take the 93%, divide it by 100 to make it a decimal, then I have a multiplier of 0.93. So growth, you add that percent to the 100. Decay, you subtract it from it. By the way, on our percent to decimal, if you want to go decimal to percent, you multiply the decimal by 100, so it moves the other direction. So one of the things I want to show you, kind of a quick trick too, there's a lot of different ways to go about it if you're given a table or something else. If you're given 2 points and they're not terribly close, you've got an x and a y and an x and a y. So keeping in mind, and this is just the overall, this will work every time you're trying to find an exponential equation if you have either a table or you have 2 points, or you have two things that happen in a time period apart. Remember, you've got the y equals ab to the x. So you want to take the bigger x and plug those x and y values into that y equals ab to the x. So in this case, we'd have 700 equals a we don't know, b we don't know, and x is 7. So we literally just took our 7 and our 700 and put them in for x and y. We're going to divide that entire equation by 40 equals ab to the third. Our a's can divide out. We'll come back to that later. But what we have here, if we take the 700 divided by 40, we get 17.5. And then b to the 7th over b to the 3rd, from our exponent laws, we subtract those two, so we have b to the 4th. Now, we can take the 4th root of this. What I usually prefer to do is the fractional exponents, where I just put it to the 1/4 power. I find that easier in the calculator. So I do 17, and if I'm typing this in, this is 17.5 to the power of parentheses 1 divided by 4. You want to make sure to put parentheses around that or you get the wrong order. So my b value, my multiplier here, is 2.0453, so on and so forth. That decimal keeps going, and oftentimes we're going to have to round things off. So I'm going to round this off to 2.05. So now that I know my b value, I need to figure out a. So what I'm going to do is, again, take this equation, and I'm going to pick one of my points. So I'll go ahead and go with the 340. And I'm going to plug in 40 for a y. I don't know a. I now know that b is 2.05, and my x value is that 3. I'm going to erase this part right here just to get it out of the way. And then I do some evaluating. 2.05 to the power of 3. So I have 40 equals a times 8.615 or 0.62. We'll go ahead and round that off. And then this is a times 8.6.2, a times 8.62. So I'm going to divide by 8.62. And I get 4.64. Now, here's the thing about this. Because we're rounding things off and because I have 2 different points I'm dealing with, some equations may come out a little bit different, and that's fine. But the way I want to write this out, once I have my a and my b value, 4.64 times 2.05 to the x. So that's the process for finding an exponential equation. We had an investigation on this. For you guys to kind of work that out on your own, I do suggest trying that because that helps more. Again, this is a trick, it's a shortcut, but there are some better ways to do it depending on what information you're given. All right, so that's that. Have a lovely day. Bye.